Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into the story of the Wright brothers today.
The Wright brothers, huh?
Yeah. You know, the first flight, Kitty Hawk, all that. But we're going way beyond the typical stuff you hear.
Deeper than the textbook version. I like it.
Right. Our source is actually this really cool podcast episode all about them that aired on Wright Brothers Day. It's packed with amazing details.
Okay, I'm all ears. Hit me with some of those amazing details.
Well, did you know that their whole journey toward flying actually started with a toy helicopter? And get this, a bicycle shop.
A toy helicopter and a bicycle shop, huh? Those are some pretty humble beginnings for, pioneers of flight.
I know, right? So their dad gave them this toy helicopter, and it wasn't just some random thing, it really stuck with them.
It really planted a seed, you could say.
Exactly. But here's the thing. That seed didn't grow in some fancy lab or anything. It grew in their bicycle shop.
Hold on, their bicycle shop. How did fixing bikes lead to building airplanes?
Okay, that's what I thought too. But it turns out it was way more than just fixing flaps. They were actually building custom bikes, experimenting with gears and all this stuff, always thinking about making things lightweight, but still strong.
Interesting. So they weren't just, mechanics. They were thinking like engineers.
Exactly. Think about it. Torque, stresses on materials, minimizing weight. These are all principles that apply to both bikes and airplanes.
I see where you're going with this.
And being in that shop, I bet they got a really good understanding of aerodynamics too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even if they didn't call it aerodynamics back then.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. A bicycle rider feels the wind, the way their body position affects things. They were totally familiar with those forces way before they even thought about building wings.
It's like their whole lives were leading up to this moment.
I know, right? It's wild. But speaking of moments, that brings us to, well, the big one. Kitty Hawk, December 17th, 1903.
Kitty Hawk, a date etched in history.
You've probably seen the photos, the kind of rickety-looking thing on a beach. But those photos don't really do it justice.
No, not at all.
It's easy to look back now and think, oh, 12 seconds, 120 feet, that's nothing. My kid's drone can do better.
Right. But we have to remember the context.
Exactly. This is 1903. Back then, heavier than air flight, people thought it was impossible.
It was a completely radical idea.
Totally.
Right.
And they didn't just, get off the ground. They achieved controlled, sustained flight. Think about the systems they had to invent. Wing warping, movable elevators, a rudder.
Revolutionary concepts. They were writing the book on flight control as they went.
Okay, wing warping. Now that one always gets me. How did they actually do that?
It's actually pretty simple in theory. Imagine you're holding a paper airplane and you want to make it tilt. You might bend one wing a little bit, right?
Yeah, to make it turn.
Exactly. That's essentially what the Wright brothers were doing, but they had a system of cables and pulleys to let the pilot control it.
So they were changing the shape of the wings while they were in the air. That's insane.
Pretty ingenious, right? And that's basically the precursor to the ailerons we see on planes today. But to really get it, you got to understand the aerodynamics.
All right, so let's talk aerodynamics. I mean, I get the basic idea of lift, but there's always more to learn, right?
Definitely. The key is something called Bernoulli's principle. It says that when the speed of a fluid, like air, increases, its pressure decreases.
Okay, I remember hearing about that.
So as air flows over the curved top of a wing, it speeds up and the pressure drops. And boom, lift.
So they figured out this complex scientific principle. They built these crazy, intricate control systems, and all while everyone was telling them it couldn't be done.
Yeah, the scientific community was pretty skeptical at the time.
That's got to be tough.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine proving everyone wrong, achieving something incredible, and people still don't believe you.
It really makes you appreciate their determination.
But wait a minute. If that first flight was so groundbreaking, why didn't the whole world just immediately jump on board? I mean, what kind of resistance did they run into?
It's a good question. You'd think seeing them fly would be proof enough, right?
Right. I mean, come on.
But back then, people really relied on those big scientific institutions for information.
I see. So it wasn't enough for just anyone to do it. It had to be, like, officially sanctioned or something.
Pretty much. And the Wright brothers, well, they were outsiders. Just a couple of bicycle mechanics tinkering away. Not exactly the scientific elite.
So even after they flew, people were still doubtful.
Oh, yeah. Some scientists said their data was messed up. Others just flat out refused to believe it was possible.
What? Seriously?
Yeah. There were even some folks who accused them of faking it, like doctoring the photograph.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. They must have been so frustrated. I mean, they did this amazing thing, and people are calling them liars.
You can imagine how disheartening it was. They had to fight tooth and nail for recognition, not just by flying, but by documenting everything, publishing their findings, even taking people to court who tried to steal their designs.
Wow, that's crazy. It makes you wonder, what if they hadn't been so persistent? What if they had just given up with all that pushback?
It's a scary thought, isn't it? The world might have waited years, maybe even decades, for airplanes.
I'm sensing a theme here. Curiosity, engineering know-how, and persistence. These guys were the definition of, like, grit.
No doubt about it, and you see that in everything they did, from designing the shape of the wings to figuring out how to control the plane once it was up in the air.
Speaking of control, let's talk about those wind tunnel experiments they did. I know they were super important, but I've never really understood how they actually worked.
It's pretty fascinating stuff. They couldn't just use computers like we do today, so they built their own wind tunnel, basically a wooden box with a fan.
A wooden box, that's it.
Yep. And they used that to test different wing shapes.
I see. So they'd make these tiny wings, put them in the box, and see what happened.
Pretty much. They attached them to a balance system inside the tunnel and measured the lift and drag at different wind speeds.
That sounds incredibly tedious.
It was. It required a lot of precision and patience. And remember, they were doing all their data analysis by hand.
No computers back then, huh?
Nope. Slide rules, graph paper, and brain power. They would record everything, plot graphs, and use all that data to refine their wing designs.
So all that data led them to Kitty Hawk and that first successful flight.
And it didn't stop there. They kept going, experimenting, tweaking their designs, making their aircraft better and better.
Now, some people say that other inventors were actually closer to achieving powered flight. How do the Wright brothers' accomplishments really stack up against those guys?
It's a good question, and honestly, there's debate about it. Sure, others were working on similar stuff, but the Wright brothers had this commitment to methodical experimentation, this understanding of control. That's what set them apart.
So it wasn't just about proving you could fly, it was about figuring out how and why.
Exactly. They were collecting data, analyzing it, using it to improve their designs. It was a scientific approach.
So they weren't just winging it, so to speak.
No, not at all. That scientific approach, combined with their mechanical skills, that's what made the dream of flight a reality.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the technical stuff, the nuts and bolts. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the impact of their invention. It wasn't just about airplanes, was it? It was about changing how humans saw the world.
Absolutely. They didn't just change transportation, they changed our perception of time and space. Before airplanes, journeys could take weeks or even months. Suddenly, the world became much smaller.
They unlocked a whole new way of experiencing the world.
Exactly, and that had a huge impact on, well, everything. Trade, commerce, art, literature, you name it. Suddenly, artists were painting the world from above. Writers were exploring themes of flight. Musicians were writing music inspired by the sounds of engines and soaring through the air.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you have any favorite examples of how flight influenced art and literature?
One that comes to mind is a painting called Champs d'Aviation by Robert Delaunay, a French artist who was totally captivated by airplanes. His paintings use these bold colors and shapes to capture the energy and movement of flight.
It's like the airplane became this muse for artists, inspiring them to see the world in a whole new way.
And it wasn't just painting. Think about writers like Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. He was a pilot himself, and his writing explored the deeper meaning of flight. His book, Wind, Sand, and Stars, is all about the human experience of flight, solitude, courage, the search for meaning. Really powerful stuff.
Wow. It's incredible how one invention could have such a ripple effect, inspiring creativity and shaping culture around the world.
And those ripples are still spreading today. Think about all the books, movies, songs, even video games inspired by flight. It really speaks to the power of the Wright brothers' legacy.
Okay, so we've seen how their invention changed transportation, inspired art, and even changed how we think about the world. But let's be real, aviation isn't all sunshine and roses. There's a darker side too, isn't there?
Unfortunately, yes. As much as aviation has brought the world together, it's also been used to, well, tear it apart.
It's true. It's like this amazing invention with so much potential for good, but also this potential for really terrible things.
Exactly. The same technology that lets us soar above the clouds also gives us a new way to fight wars. Think about World War I, just a little over a decade after Kitty Hawk. It was the first big conflict to use airplanes for combat.
Wow, that's right.
The airplane went from this symbol of peace and progress to a weapon of war practically overnight.
Yeah, it's pretty sobering when you think about it. It's a reminder that even the best inventions can have unintended consequences.
And sadly, the impact of aviation on warfare just kept growing. The bombing raids in World War II, helicopters in Vietnam, drones in modern conflicts. It's all part of how the airplane has changed how we fight wars.
It's like we open up this whole new dimension of destruction. Not just physical destruction, but psychological too. Can you imagine living with the constant fear of bombs falling from the sky?
It's terrifying. And it brings up all these tough questions about, the ethics of using air power. How do we balance national security with protecting innocent lives?
It's a really tough issue. And it's not just about war either. All those planes in the sky, all that travel, it's also having a big impact on the environment. Noise pollution, carbon emissions, damage to the ozone layer.
You're right, we can't ignore those things. When you think about how much air travel happens every single day, well, it's clear that aviation is leaving its mark on the planet. Burning jet fuel releases a lot of greenhouse gases, which contribute to climate change. And then there's the noise pollution, which can really disrupt wildlife and affect people's health.
Yeah, it's a tough trade-off. We love how fast and convenient air travel is, but we're starting to see the downsides.
Exactly. But that's why there's this push to make aviation more sustainable. We're seeing the development of new fuels, more efficient airplane designs, even electric planes.
Electric planes? That's so cool. I never really thought about that. How does that even work?
Well, they've got some hurdles to overcome, mainly battery capacity, but the potential is huge. Imagine airports powered by renewable energy, quiet planes taking off, way fewer emissions. It's a pretty exciting idea.
It sounds amazing, like a glimpse into a future where we can have the best of both worlds. We can still fly, but we can do it in a way that doesn't harm the planet.
That's the goal, right? Finding a balance. The Wright brothers gave us this incredible gift, the ability to fly. Now it's up to us to use that gift responsibly and make sure aviation keeps benefiting humanity without destroying the planet in the process.
Well said. Wow, what a journey. We've covered so much, from their early experiments to the impact of flight on war, art, the environment, and everything in between.
It's been a fascinating exploration of the Wright brothers' legacy.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good reminder that innovation isn't always a straight path. It takes constant work, critical thinking, and a willingness to adapt.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What will the next chapter of aviation look like? Will we keep pushing the limits of speed and distance? Will we find ways to make it more accessible and sustainable for everyone?
Or will we even go beyond Earth's atmosphere, maybe even to the stars? The possibilities are pretty much endless. It's up to us to shape the future of aviation, inspired by the Wright brothers' spirit of innovation and their belief in what humans can achieve.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.